The California High-Speed Rail Authority has made a preliminary choice as to the top bidder to start construction on the initial 29-mile segment from Madera to Fresno. But that's not to say that any of this has quieted the critics who charge that the bidding process was flawed, delays and cost overruns will only mount, and the money will never be there to build it. Supporters, such as Governor Brown, however, say it's a critical piece of California's future infrastructure. We'll examine what is happening as the first segment is about to be built, and we'll discuss some of the short and long-term challenges that could delay or derail California's bullet train with Tom Richards, Vice Chairman of California's High-Speed Rail Authority Board, and Dr. Brian Weatherford from the nonpartisan Legislative Analyst Office and an expert on high-speed rail. California's high-speed rail. All aboard?
From Fresno, the Maddy Report with Executive Director of the Maddy Institute, Mark Keppler.
Welcome. The bidding process to build the first segment of California's high-speed rail system, a 29-mile segment between Madera and Fresno, has begun, but not without some controversy. The preliminary results are that the top-rated team had a low-cost bid at a cost of $985 million, well under the projected $1.2 to $1.8 billion bid that they were expecting. It also had the lowest technical score of the 5 bidders. The team with the second lowest bid had a technical score almost 20% higher, but at a cost of $1.1 billion, about 12% more. Our guest is Tom Richards, Vice Chairman of the Board of California's High-Speed Rail Authority, who will be one of those who will have to make the final call on which team wins the coveted contract. Welcome to the Maddy Report.
Thanks for the invitation.
Well, how do you respond to those who worry that there's too much emphasis on cost over technical competence by selecting the cheapest alternative, being penny wise and pound foolish? How do you respond to that?
Well, I think that the first thing to firmly understand is all 5 teams were qualified. Otherwise, we wouldn't have gone through the process to ask them to prepare responses to a request for proposal. With that in mind, I think we're the same stewards of the state's money as we would be of our own business, our own family. I think that the challenge we would have if we had not selected, or at least had recommended to us for selection, the low bidder, is we would have had an outcry from people around the state wondering, why in the world are you not accepting the cheapest price that we've got available?
Why did you pay an extra $300 million
Exactly
for
right.
the project? Well, critics are also kind of going after the bidding process. Originally, when it was announced in March, it was supposed to be a 2-step screening process where only the top 3 highest scoring technical bids would then move forward to a second phase where they could put in their cost proposals. In 2012 of August, it was changed. The evaluation process was amended by staff so that all bids that had a passing technical score could move on to the competitive price bidding process. Critics claim that that watered down the technical evaluation. What do you say to that?
Well, again, going back to my initial comment that all 5 design-build teams were qualified, it didn't seem logical to me, and I really applaud our CEO's request of our chair, Jeff Morales, our CEO, in suggesting if we're having proposals prepared by all 5 teams, why aren't we looking at them all? In fact, as you probably know, Mark, we also we had proposed and agreed to pay a stipend for those proposing because it's a very long and very expensive process. So why in the world?
So you paid for their proposals?
We paid for some reimbursement for some of their costs. Mm-hmm. Why would we commit taxpayers' funds and not look at the proposal? So back in before March of 2012, I had some discussion with staff about that. So I'm very happy, one, that our CEO went to the chair, and secondly, that Chair Richard agreed and set up a process to make that change.
Another issue, a big issue here is jobs. That's been an important selling point for high-speed rail. Mm-hmm. There's a $1.5 million training grant to underwrite skills training by the Fresno Regional Workforce Investment Board for at least 325 people in construction and other fields related to high-speed rail. 10% of that, though, must be given to, quote, disadvantaged workers, and they're defined as including the homeless, those receiving public assistance, felons, and those in trade union apprenticeship programs. What do you say to those who question that there are such set-asides?
Welcome Central California to being able to participate in this project. The reality is that this is a part of the National Hiring Initiative, which is a federal program. I think you probably know from your background that if you are involved in a project receiving federal funds, you cannot have a local hire policy. Through the national hiring.
It's kind of he who has the gold makes the rules.
Exactly, and that's where the gold came from. So you wouldn't be surprised, because of your travels up and down this state, to know that the entire Central Valley qualifies. We are a disadvantaged economy up and down this valley. So it was a means by which we could basically, hopefully, have an opportunity to direct business, if they qualify and if they're the best bidders for the work, to our local businesses and local workers. We've got the highest unemployment in the state. This makes great sense for Central California.
And I think it's also important to remember it is 10%.
That's correct. That's exactly correct.
Okay, what about cost overruns? Recently there were some pre-construction planning budget costs. I think it's $878 million, a 12% increase. Now that's within the limit approved by the voters in 2008. But what do you say to those that worry that this may be a harbinger of things to come?
Well, take a look at what it is that that we've asked funds for, or that we have approved funds for, and these funds are for planning, in the planning area of the project, not in the construction area. These contracts, for which there have now been asked, what, about a 12% increase, are contracts that were let in 2006 and 2007. These were all for planning stages. A number of things have happened since 2007. A lot have had to do, of course, with the Prop 1A in 2008, and more importantly, in 2012, our revised business plan, which embraced a blended approach to building high-speed rail. The result of that, and also being responsive to stakeholders up and down the valley, whether they be governmental jurisdictions or individuals, there have been a number of changes and revisions and looking at additional environmental work up and down the alignment, and that's cost more money.
Okay, well, very good. Up next, some of the immediate challenges that could delay this summer's construction date. That conversation in a moment. This is the Maddy Report. Welcome back. High-speed rail is facing a number of new problems that could jeopardize its construction kickoff this summer. Will the new challenges delay the project even further? We're talking with Tom Richards, Vice Chair of the California High-Speed Authority Board. First question deals with BNSF, Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad. They operate freight lines that follow the 130-mile segment where high-speed rail is going. They've stated that there's no deal to build on or near their existing tracks. If they stall on finalizing a deal, could that further delay the project?
Well, we don't expect any stalling, and I think that their letter has been mischaracterized to some extent. In the area that we're talking about for this first construction phase, which is about 29 miles between Madera and the south of the Fresno station stop, as far as I am aware, there are no issues. We've had and continue to have a very good working relationship with BNSF, and we would contemplate that continuing. And ultimately, when we do need agreements with BNSF, as we are building across the state, we will have those agreements in place. But there's nothing that I'm aware of that slows us down on this.
It seems like you have had a good relationship with them, and this might be a negotiating ploy. Who knows? I guess we'll find out as it goes forward.
They've been a good partner.
Good. Let me ask you another question. Congressman Jeff Denham, he's a Republican from Atwater who chairs the House Rail Subcommittee, is holding hearings on the routes being chosen and the timeline of the project. You've also got the State Senate Transportation Committee looking at the changes in the bid evaluation process. Is all this government oversight going to slow down the process?
We don't think so. And so far as Congressman Denham, we appreciate his criticism. He's helped make this project better. I think that we've got a common goal, and that is to do what's in the better interest of our state and the country. So we look forward to his hearing in Madera late May. With regards to the State Transportation Committee, our CEO has met with Senator Sagne, who is the chair, and with Senator Galgiani, explained the bid process, and as it's been reported to me, I think they're satisfied with what we've done, and we don't anticipate anything further from the State Transportation Committee.
Well, it's a government project, so there's going to be a lot of government agencies involved. One of them is the Federal Surface Transportation Board. You recently asked them to exempt high-speed rail from the federal permit approval process. They didn't agree to that. Is that going to add another layer of government bureaucracy to the project?
Well, I think that what we asked first was we didn't believe that we should be subject to their agency. They disagreed with that. The second part of the request is then to exempt us, and that we have not heard the answer on yet.
So you still have to hear on that issue?
We do, yeah.
You know, the Fresno Bee's George Hostetler recently wrote about a $4.6 million amount of money promised by the authority to the city of Fresno to set up a one-stop shop inside City Hall to hire extra staffers to work on bullet train issues as well as help businesses in and along the train's path. But apparently that money hasn't materialized yet. What can you tell us about that?
Well, the most recent meetings were just last week with officials for both the city and the county of Fresno. And we think as a result of those meetings this will be resolved within the next 10 days. And this is to reimburse those authorities for expenses they have in support of high-speed rail up to $4.3 million. Yeah.
So that money, could you explain us the process? So the city would be involved with high-speed rail. They'd be notified by high-speed rail about where they're going out to bid, and also EDC?
Well, the EDC is working with the city and with the county and with high-speed rail now, and have been kind of like going out in front of us, talking to stakeholders along the alignment to make sure that they are taking advantage of all of the services and the rights that they have being involved in and around this project.
So the idea is to be kind of proactive about this?
It's to be very proactive, yes.
Okay. Well, up next, some of the long-term challenges that could stop California's bullet train from ever being built. That conversation in a moment. This is the Maddy Report. Welcome back. High-speed rail is a daunting project with some equally daunting challenges. What are they, and what is the likelihood they'll be overcome? We're talking with Tom Richards, Vice Chairman of the California High-Speed Rail Authority Board. You know, Tom, critics have recently filed a lawsuit alleging that the authority's blended system, which is connecting high-speed rail with the local commuter rail lines in the Bay Area and in Southern California, are going to violate the voter-approved bond that said that you had to get from San Francisco to LA in 2 hours and 40 minutes. What are the implications if that lawsuit is successful?
Well, this is all part of what the governor directed, not so much the blended system, but a little over a year ago when he said you've got to do it better and you've got to do it faster and you've got to do it cheaper. One of the reasons that we've been able to reduce what was originally announced in late 2011 with regards to what the costs look like was because of the blended system. And
the costs were pretty significant. My recollection was the reduction
around 100 billion.
And went down about 30 billion.
68 billion now. A good deal of that is because of the blended system. And as you can imagine, before we either announced or published the blended system as a part of our business plan update in 2012, we got the appropriate legal advice from our counselors in Sacramento who indicated it was still compliant with Proposition 1A. So while we don't encourage litigation, we think that we're on solid ground with regards to the blended approach. Those projects that are being undertaken in the blended approach are for projects that will be of service or as a part of the high-speed rail. So it makes great sense to us.
You know, the authority also plans to have about $42 billion, which is about 61% of the total cost of the project paid for with federal dollars. To date, about 10% of that amount has been allocated, about $3.3 billion. The General Accounting Office of the GAO has recently noted that sustained congressional support for additional funding is, quote, one of the biggest challenges to completing this project, unquote. Does that concern you?
Well, of course, you know, funding on any project concerns you, but it's also of interest that after an extensive audit by the GAO for most of 2012, the GAO came back with its report to the Congress in reasonably strong support for what we've done, the work that we've done, and the process that we've undertaken. So we consider that to a great degree an affirmation of the work that we're doing. Now, with regards to the fact that you know, all the money is not allocated at this point, our commitment has been we will not start any part of the project unless that portion the funding has been identified.
You know, I was reading somewhere that they're going to try to pick up federal funding in 2015 through 2030, and that would require an average of $2.6 billion a year be allocated by the federal government. And things may change, the economy may change, so we really don't know at this point.
That's right.
The authority also, though, their plans call for about $13 billion, about 19% of the total. of the construction cost to come from private dollars. Now, critics assert that's never going to happen and the state taxpayers are going to be on the hook for the amount. When do you expect private investment to materialize?
Well, we think the critics will be surprised, pleasingly surprised, from the perspective of those supporting high-speed rail. But quite clearly, as any person in business would know, I mean, it's a flyer to make an investment in something that you have no basis to know whether or not it's going to work. The key to high-speed rail is to start generating revenue. So we've had preliminary talks with people on Wall Street, investment bankers and the such, or the like, and the reality is that we believe that when we have the first operating segment up and operating and revenue being proven, is the time to start looking to the private sector for contribution.
Now, there are three basic segments. There's this valley section, basically, Stockton to Bakersfield?
Well, the first section, the first that we've got funding for is 133 miles, roughly from Chowchilla down to roughly Bakersfield.
And then the second segment will be Bakersfield to Los Angeles.
To the north end of the San Fernando Valley.
And then the third one is the complete build-out of the system from San Francisco to Los Angeles.
Yeah, well, so to speak, by 2022, we're contemplating the first operating segment, which would be from the San Fernando Valley to Merced. The completion of the first phase, which would be a one-seat ticket from LA Transbay or San Francisco Transbay Station to LA Union Station in 2027 or 2028.
So you're expecting then private, I'm trying to follow the money here.
2022 we'll be looking for money.
We're looking for money because then you have actually people that are riding the system,
right.
And the
revenue proven.
Right, and so then the private sector is going to, okay, that makes sense. Let me ask you another question, maybe the most obvious question, and that is, do you think California can afford high-speed rail? I mean, is it a luxury or a necessity?
Well, it's clearly not a luxury. In my mind, it is absolutely a necessity. The reality is that we can't use the same technology in the 21st century we did in the 20th century for surface transportation. We've got an outdated, beaten-up, overused freeway system up and down the state of California. We have an air corridor between Los Angeles and San Francisco that's the busiest in the country, serving over 5 million traveling passengers a year. We've got about $18.5 or $19 billion as calculated by Caltrans of lost time and gas with people sitting on freeways trying to get to work or be productive. We also have the implications of our surface transportation on air quality and our environment. We've got to look at different ways of supporting mass transit in this state and in this country. For this valley, which I believe is really important, and frankly for this state, but for this valley, if we look at this as strictly an opportunity to provide construction jobs now, we're missing the point. We have an opportunity in this valley with our universities and colleges up and down the Central Valley to actually be the innovators, the leaders in the development, operation, and construction of high-speed rail as it finds itself moving across the United States in the 21st century.
Well, there's also the issue of the maintenance yard, the maintenance facility.
That's correct.
That could generate thousands of jobs.
There are 10 sites that have been identified. The decision hasn't been made on which one would be selected yet.
I had done some research and I had found that they're talking about the alternative cost of transportation would be about $170 billion if you're talking about new freeway lanes, new airport gates, etc.
That's right.
High-speed rail costs about $68 billion.
$68 billion.
Those that believe in high-speed rail say this is a pretty good investment. Yeah. Well,
this is for our kids. This is for our grandkids. And that's one of the objections that a lot of people our age have, and they say, well, it's not, I'm never going to use it.
I plan on using it if it's built. Well, thank you very much for being here.
Right.
Up next, what the nonpartisan legislative analyst office has to say about the prospects for high-speed rail. That conversation in a moment. This is the Maddy Report. Welcome back. Our guest is Brian Weatherford, the LAO's expert on high-speed rail. Welcome back to the Maddy Report.
Thank you for having me back.
Well, Brian, what are the dates going forward? What's the timeline?
Sure. So as you may be aware, the High-Speed Rail Authority is prepared to award a contract for the design build of the very first construction project this summer. Following that, in the fall, they're expected to complete the environmental review for the segment from Fresno to Bakersfield. And if that proceeds as on schedule, the High-Speed Rail Authority plans to issue the requests for proposals for the next two construction segments. and then those projects would be awarded spring 2013 or maybe a little bit later.
When do we expect to break ground?
Well, that depends on the design builder and their schedule, because they have to complete the final design work. There will be right-of-way acquisition that has already begun and clearing the site. So you may see some work happening pretty soon in between Madera and Fresno, but it's hard to know because that's up to the design builder.
What about the most likely cause of any delay in the Central Valley segment? What do you think that's going to be?
Right. So as I mentioned with the approval of the environmental reporting, at this point in time, it seems like it's been delayed several times already, but presumably they have it right this time with regards to all the various stakeholders having had a substantial or an appropriate amount of time to review the documentation. And so if they do get their approvals in the fall, then the project should proceed pretty smoothly in the Central Valley.
It's the environmental reviews I'm thinking are going to be the most time-consuming?
Getting all the approvals from the various, receiving the public input, refining the studies, and then getting the approvals of all the various state and federal regulators has been something that's pushed this environmental report back a little bit so far. But since it has been pushed back, the High-Speed Rail Authority seems to think that fall 2013 is a pretty good time frame. Okay,
last year we talked about this project.
Yes.
A year later, are you more or less concerned about cost overruns?
Well, with regards to the Central Valley project, we are less concerned with cost overruns because we do have some initial information that shows that their cost estimates were actually maybe a little bit high. However, our feelings about the cost for the overall high-speed rail program from San Francisco to LA is unchanged. We have no new information on that.
I want to kind of jump to that a little bit. You had said last year that the project's funding is highly speculative.
Right.
There's the issue of federal funding. That's supposed to be 61% of the project. Private investment, another 19%. Cap and trade money. We want to talk about some of those issues?
Sure. So to move this project forward, the High-Speed Rail Authority has proposed building an initial operating segment that would run, say, from Merced to Palmdale, that they believe that they can run trains and actually generate a profit, and that they could then sell that profit to a private investor to fund the construction of the remaining system. However, to get to that initial operating segment, they need over $20 billion of additional investment. And they have proposed that nearly all of that funding would come from the federal government.
Because the private sector is not going to kick in until there's a usable segment.
Right. And so, the timeline on that really depends on how fast that money can come. So, it could come from the federal government or it could come from other sources. The problem that we see is that they need something of like $2 billion a year that they haven't really identified a specific source, just federal government and perhaps maybe using the proceeds from cap and trade auction revenues. And the speculative part is we don't really know where that money is going to come from and how realistic it is to assume they can get $2 to $3 billion a year every year for the next decade.
Okay. What about the institutional capacity and effectiveness of the High-Speed Rail Authority? Has that improved?
It certainly has, and that's a bright spot with the High-Speed Rail Authority. Is last time when we talked, the High-Speed Rail Authority did not have an executive director, they didn't have a chief risk officer, they didn't have a chief financial officer, they didn't have a chief engineer. And since
then,
that's
a lot of chiefs.
It is, and it was very concerning for the legislature and I think for all Californians at that time. And since we've talked, they filled all their executive level positions, and they're embarking on a complete organizational restructuring to add a lot of staff and bring a lot of capacity in-house, both to execute these contracts, to oversee the contracts as construction proceeds. And so we're more optimistic with respect to the organizational structure.
Great. Well, I want to thank Dr. Brian Weatherford from the California Legislative Analyst Office, as well as California High-Speed Rail Authority Board Member Tom Richards. If you want to stay up to date with local and state politics, you can sign up for our award-winning and free e-newsletter, The Maddy Daily, by logging on to our website at maddyinstitute.org. And now, another perspective.
California's first-in-the-nation high-speed rail project is chugging down the line with the award of a $1 billion contract to construct a 29-mile stretch from Madera to Fresno South End. But a big hurdle awaits in the courts. Opponents say that the state's funding plan violates Proposition 1A, the high-speed rail plan approved by voters. Now, a decision by the judge is expected in August. If the project survives the challenge, groundbreaking could happen in late summer or fall. But there's a bigger hurdle ahead and its Republican opposition to the project in the House of Representatives. Unless the GOP changes direction or the Democrats take control of the House and more funding is sent California's way, high-speed rail could stall on the tracks. A critical time will come early next year when the GOP-controlled House takes up the 5-year transportation spending bill. This is Bill McEwen for the Maddy Report.
The views expressed in the Maddy Report are those of the individuals participating in the program and do not necessarily reflect those of the Maddy Institute, the California Channel, Casey, or Valley PBS. If you'd like to share your thoughts about the points and opinions shared in the Maddy Report, visit our website at valleypbs.org/Maddy.
This is Mark Keppler for the Maddy Report. Thanks for joining us.